check, good. So I'm Max Ceron, Max Ceron, CWB Association Welding Podcast. Today we have a really cool guest, Welding Podcast.
The show is about to begin.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the CWB Association podcast. My name is Max Ceron, as always with you, looking for the best and the most interesting guests across the landscape. And today we have a guest coming to us with another slant on the steel industry, and one that is at the base of its core relevant to all of us. I have Lynndon Novak here coming to us from Manitoba, talking to us about blacksmithing and what it is and all the juicy stuff we're going to get into. So, Lando, how you doing?
Doing great, man. Doing just freaking swell. It's been a heck of a summer, and it's finally coming down to the snow is going to be coming soon, man. And I'm just like, oh boy, that was summer. Hey, I wish it would have lasted another month, but is what it is. Hey, such is life. So here we go.
Well, let's start with, where are you? Like, where are you located right now?
I'm in the beautiful Winnipeg, buddy.
You're in Winnipeg. So why do you not have snow? I'm looking outside at 3 inches of snow here in Regina. I got three. You're talking about maybe getting snow. My Mustang is buried. I didn't get a chance to move my boat.
No.
Now because I was out of town. So now my boat's full of snow. My vehicles are all stuck in my yard, and you're all like, oh, snow's coming.
Dude, we had a thunderstorm last night. What? And like a full-blown thunderstorm. The house was shaking with the thunder. Woke us all up. Everyone at work was like, yeah, the thunder last night was insane. I was expecting it to turn to snow maybe at some point today, but no, it was a beautiful day, plus 14. Like, what the heck's going on? Yeah. And then, what are you, 5 hours away, 5-hour drive away?
Yeah,
from
five and a half if you're slow. But I'm sitting on snow, and it's been snowing all day. It's supposed to snow for 3 days straight.
Oh,
welcome to winter.
I don't know if I want to say take off or if I'm happy, because I personally love winter. Winter is my jam season, dude. Now I'm not dealing with plus 40 degrees Celsius temperatures where I don't want to be in the shop welding and forging. And it's going to be nice and cool. And it's like, okay, now it's in the shop go time, but let's do this. Let's fire it up and get some work done, right? So this is my season.
I love the plus 40, and I don't mind being plus 50 when the shop's hot. I kind of dig that weird, like where it's so hot that the floor's hot. I kind of dig that.
Oh, geez, that's insane, buddy. Well, you're from Chile, so maybe there's just a little something going on there.
There's a thing there, some genetic coding.
Yeah.
All right, Landon. So let's talk about where you got your start, because you were initially, you are a welder, right?
Yep. I weld full time.
When did you start? In high school? Did you start in high school, or where did you start picking it up?
Dude, okay, so I went to school up north in a remote town, essentially. I started off my venture in Flin Flon, eventually moved to a town of Snow Lake that had like not even 1,000 people. So there was a shops program there, but it was all woodworking. There was no metalworking whatsoever in the shops program. So, I got to learn how to do woodworking. I learned how to do some drafting in that course as well. And I gravitated towards it big time. I love doing that stuff. And I started playing with tools at home. My dad wasn't much of a tool guy. So I kind of had, like a handsaw and a drill and some, scrap pieces of wood and stuff that were lying around that I started playing with. And I started diving through our old stuff and found some old speakers. And I decided to build my own speaker box. And that was kind of my first thing that I ever made. Was I tried making my own speaker boxes, and I actually cut the holes for the speakers using my drill. I went around the perimeter of what I traced out with a drill, and then punched it out, and then took a file and sanded it down. So it's like, the core roots of finding what you can find to make it work, right? And to this day, with my welding and blacksmithing, I still find myself doing that all the freaking time. It's just, you got to do what you got to do to make it work, right? Mm-hmm. So, I gravitated towards making things a lot. I spent a lot of time in the bush when I was living up north. We built a lot of, cabin style or log style forts per se. And then I moved to Winnipeg. And I totally fell off the train. I started partying a ton. And for about 5 years, I just kind of was on this like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I worked in retail. I worked in computer tech for a while. I actually moved to Winnipeg for computer programming. I got accepted to SAIT, and as well, I got accepted to Red River College for their programming. I didn't know what to do. Family found out that they were moving to Headingley. My dad got accepted as an RCMP officer there. And they said, well, why don't you just move to Winnipeg with us? And I said, okay, sure. In the whole midst of everything, me and my dad had a massive falling out. And it was like, no, the falling out was happening already, but it happened during the move big time. And it was like, no, I ain't moving in with you guys. Got my own apartment. 3 months into programming, I was like, this is not what I want to do for the rest of my life. It was just driving me insane, being up till 4 o'clock in the morning, staring at a computer screen. I'd already been staring at it all day. I'm just like, no. I went to the dean and I said, this just is not what I want to do. It's totally not what I thought it was. And I got to do something else. And he gave me the option to, if you want to transfer, you're a really smart guy. You've got great grades. We'd love to see you go into something else. I said, you know what? I don't even know what the heck I want to do, man. I need to get out in the world and figure myself out, right? So like I said, I got into retail. I did a little bit of computer tech. I got into a couple different construction companies. And throughout all of that, I ended up meeting a gentleman that had gone to the Winnipeg South Tech at the time for welding. Loved the course, loved what he learned, loved what welding gave him, and he convinced me to look at doing the same thing. So I did. I started looking into it. I applied to both Red River and Winnipeg South Tech. Those are the two main colleges here in Winnipeg. Red River had a hefty waiting list, and Red River's course runs over 2 years. Winnipeg South Tech had a hefty waiting list for their day course, but when I found out that they had a night course and was interested in that, they said, "You want to start like in a month?" And yes, of course. So I signed up for the night course, got accepted to that, and I started welding, and just instantly was like, dude, why did I do this 5 years ago? This is awesome. I have nothing but great things to say about the friend that helped me gravitate towards that. Unfortunately, not the greatest person, I found out, because dude's in jail now. And I look back on some of the things that we worked together for a year, and it was like, that kind of doesn't surprise me, to be honest. But thank God he gravitated me in this direction, because I'm just like, working with metal has literally become everything I do. Eat, sleep, and breathe this stuff, man. And I literally eat, sleep, and breathe this stuff. I've got rust stains on the bottom of my bathtub and clothes that are just, enamored in grinding dust. So I literally live, eat, and sleep this stuff. I love it, dude. But my wife, not so much, because of the rust stains on everything, but whatever.
So let's talk about this night course that you took. What was it like? How long was the course? Was it every night? Was it a couple days a week? Or was it like just a prep course, or was it apprenticeship? Like you were coming out with hours and stuff?
Right. So of course, dude, full course, apprenticeship level 1. The idea is you get that under your belt, and then you get into the workforce and you start working towards your apprenticeships, right? So it was a 5 days a week course. I started at, I believe it was starting at 4 o'clock and ending at 10 o'clock. It was a 10-month program. You had the ability to accelerate through the program if you wanted to. There was a guy, if I'm not mistaken, that he finished the course in like 4 months, but he had a lot of welding experience under his belt prior to taking the course already. So it was just a walk in the park for him. It was like, do this, get the marks, pass the test, and away he goes, right? Got the CWB comes in, they do all your coupon testing with you so that you're walking away with your tickets, all position tickets in stick and MIG. Don't believe we did any TIG tickets in that course. And it was all mild steel that we were getting our tickets for as well. The whole basis of the course essentially is to prep you for being a iron worker or a manufacturer. Both those sectors are pretty strong in Winnipeg. Manufacturing seems to be the thing that's really strong in Winnipeg. So they really push that glue gun on you. No offense. That's a hot shot or hot take right there for everybody. But literally, you go to these manufacturing companies and you don't really need to have that apprenticeship under your belt. You could walk in there and be like, yeah, I was a farmer. I learned how to MIG weld, and I walked into the factory and they got it for me. But I've worked with a lot of those guys, and I much prefer working with the guys that have gone to school and learned things the right way, and they don't take the shortcuts. They understand what's actually happening just versus being like, it works, right? So that was a lot of what I got from the colleges. I walked out of there understanding how things actually work versus just figuring it out and constantly trying to figure it out as time goes on. I actually ended up going back to the college after I graduated and saying, hey, I kind of feel like I want to learn some more. Is there a chance, that I can come back and do some more with you guys? I was working already at the time for a trailer manufacturing company, and I felt like there was just certain positions that I had either lost track of or whatever. Went back and I spent a couple of weeks with the instructor, and he went over those couple of positions with me and techniques and got me right back up to par with things. I kind of blame the summer break maybe, and fooling around too much over the summer break prior to getting a job, because you do the 2-week co-op thing when you graduate, right? And I went to the trailer manufacturing place. They offered me a job, and I said, well, it's summertime. You could take the summer off now that I graduated. I want to, celebrate.
There's no such thing. There's no such thing as summers off. What are you talking about?
That was a bad idea, dude. That was a bad idea. I honestly think I let a lot of skills slip during those couple of months off. And that's kind of something that if you're new to welding and you've gone into a school or you've taken a course with somebody privately or whatever it is that you're doing, you got to utilize those skills right away and keep on top of it and grow those skills. You do what I did and stuff slips. It's the way it is, right? So I learned my lesson the hard way, got back into the trailer manufacturing company after the summer off. And after some time back at the school there, and I worked there for 2 years. While working there, I found out about New Flyer, which is right down the street, and I started applying at New Flyer like crazy because of the pay difference. The pay scale is like way better for New Flyer. This guy was paying me minimum wage essentially to weld, and I accepted it for what it is. I was new to welding. I didn't have any experience in welding whatsoever prior to taking this job and the school and stuff like that. So I was like, this is getting my foot in the door kind of thing. So I started playing at New Flyer like crazy after having that little bit of basis under me. But trying to get in with New Flyer just seemed fruitless, man. Like, dude, I would get an interview and, yeah, we'll call you in a couple months. A couple of months? What? Okay. Apply again. Yeah, you're great. When can you start? I can start in a week or 2 weeks. I just have to give my other employer, some notice and see what he says. Okay, great. Broke my foot. Phone them up. Hey, I broke my foot. I can't work right now. It's going to be about a month before I can walk. All right, give us a call back in a month. Oh, sorry. After a month, sorry, position's not available right now. Right back into the whole apply and interview process all over again. Eventually panned out for me really damn good, dude, man. I ended up getting offered a job with the research and development program. And that's where I'm at nowadays, is I'm working with the research and development program. As far as welding goes, though, I don't get the full days of welding anymore. And that's what I wanted with a production facility is you go in there, you put your lid down, and you're just laying beads all day. There's no screwing around of going and picking stuff up on the forklift. And that's what I dealt with at that trailer manufacturing company is you had to do it all. You were on the bandsaw, you're on the drill press, you're at the plasma cutter, you're laying out jigs and stuff like that. And it was just, you really got to know it all. I was really in the mindset like, I went to school for welding. I need a welding job. I don't know where it was that I lost that mentality, but I'm so thankful that I did, because you don't need to go just into welding. That welding is an awesome, awesome asset to have in so many other jobs. And research and development has proved that to me, because, like I said, I weld let's say maybe 4 hours a week nowadays, if I'm lucky. That's on average. There's weeks where I'm welding every day for a week, but that's pretty damn rare, dude.
One of the things you brought up was, when you were coming out of school and there's really no difference between being in apprenticeship or having any tickets if you want to get into manufacturing or if you want to get into, different types of welding. And this is something that's very endemic of Manitoba. Manitoba's kind of like the cutoff line for where apprenticeship seems to matter and where it doesn't. If you go west of Manitoba, apprenticeship is big. It's compulsory in Alberta, so you have to be apprentice to weld, period. Saskatchewan, we push it. Every college, every training center, we are a part of the apprenticeship system throughout, and it's what we aim for. BC's in the same boat. Then you get to Manitoba, and I've literally had people in Manitoba tell me that we don't care about apprenticeship. Like, we just don't care.
Straight up.
Just don't even want to talk about Red Seal programs, don't even want to invest into it, because there's this thought that, I'll train them up, they'll get a Red Seal, then they'll leave to make more money, which is really not how that plays out. But if you wanted to look at it that way, I think maybe you should look at how much your company's paying people in the first place. Because then maybe they won't leave. Ontario, Quebec, they're not big into apprenticeship. Ontario's trying hard to get into it, but they got a long way to go. Then when you hit the East Coast, there's a couple provinces that are really good, like Nova Scotia, New Brunswick. They're heavy in apprenticeship. They're back on track, which is why so many people from the East Coast come to the West to work because of apprenticeship, because they have the same lineups and they'll get the same pay. And that's why in the middle, everyone gets ignored. And then Manitoba and Ontario and Quebec are like, why isn't anyone coming here? It's like, well, because you don't have apprenticeship. Like, people would come to your province if they knew what they were going to get paid, but they don't. So they don't come. And I mean, that's a very large generalization. But when you were in college or this program, was there any push at all to be like, were people being like, I want to be a Red Seal, I want to hammer out my 3 years and just get this done? Like, have you ever gone back to try to get your level 2, level 3, and then get your Red Seal?
I'm very glad that you brought this up, because it's actually something that I've wanted to discuss with you, even in private. Me and you have known each other for a couple of years now. And I've always wondered about that. What would it matter if I went and got my Red Seal? And what would it take for me to go and get my Red Seal at this point as well? I have spoken with 2 employers in my time, and out of handfuls of employers, I've only spoken with 2 in Manitoba at this point that have asked me about a Red Seal, or have, made notification that eventually you need your Red Seal, or you do need your Red Seal. The city of Winnipeg was the one that was like, you need your Red Seal. You have to be a Red Seal welder. You come into this job and you have to figure out how the job even works. You have to come in, you have to quote what steel you're using, how you're building it, all this other stuff. So yeah, you need your Red Seal for that stuff, right? That's not apprentice level stuff. That's not farm level stuff. That's high-end knowledge there, and engineering involved in it too, right? And that's, luckily enough, that's where I'm involved now. The other company that was somewhat interested in it, but wasn't pushing that I have it, pushed that they would want to see it eventually, was the Ironworkers Union. I was really interested in going there. I have a friend that's gone in there. He's got his Red Seal now, 4 years working for the company, apprentice every year, boom, your Red Seal, making damn good money. Money,
100%. I was just out in Ontario, visited 2 ironworker halls, 736, 721, and I worked for the ironworkers when I was younger. And every union, Boilermakers, ironworkers, pipe fillers, millwrights, the Boilermakers, they will all push you towards the Red Seals, because it's very clearly laid out the path. 1, 2, 3, journey person, and then you got your Red Seal. And whether it's as a welder or just within their union, you can be a Red Seal Boilermaker without welding or iron worker. I mean, they all have their different levels and I guess partitions, but in Manitoba, that's not very common. And in Saskatchewan, I got sat down by a boss, and it was like, if you ever want to be a supervisor, if you ever want to be a foreman, if you ever want to climb the ladder, you need to have your red seal and maybe have two, because one's probably not even enough to set you apart from other people, which is what I ended up doing, is getting two, because I wanted to climb the ladder. And that's how it, and out west, we're told, you want to climb the ladder, you got to go to school, you got to,
Right.
you got to have this paper, because you could be the best welder in the world, and let's say you get fired tomorrow. What proof do you have? Right? Like, you could work for a company in Manitoba for 25 years and be the best welder they have on the floor. They fire you tomorrow, you're on the street, and then when you just go to the next company, it's like, well, I welded for 25 years. They're like, okay, doing what? Well, trailers. Okay, and what did you do? Well, I don't know, like trailers. Like, well, do you have any certification? Well, no. It's like, it's tough. It'd be like going to a doctor and being like, well, where'd you go to school? Well, I'm really good at healing people. Like, trust me. I've had this practice. Yeah, just trust me. I've had this practice for 25 years. No one's died. We're good. Like, well, I'd like to see some certification on the wall, dude. Really? Like,
well, that's one of the things that sucks about Manitoba too, is you go to school here. If you go to school, that is, you get your tickets that are, they're expire in 1 year or 2 years after getting
for
them.
CWB, TSSA,
Right.
or
yeah, I couldn't remember.
Sometimes 3. Yeah.
It's 1 year through the company is what it is. 2 years through CWB. So you get your tickets and you've got 2 years to utilize them, find a job. Almost any job you find in Manitoba outside of, like I said, the Ironworkers Union, like any manufacturing job, they don't care that you walked in with your tickets. I mean, it proves that you know how to weld, so it kind of alleviates some of having to worry about that. But they're not going to pay you more because you've got your tickets. They're not going to treat you any differently necessarily because you've got your tickets. They're going to put you through the exact same stuff that they put all of their welders through. No, you've got to go write our test and get our tickets. And then you've been working at this company, say, for 5 years. Your CWB tickets that you got in school have expired. And now you've only got the tickets that you've got for this company doing whatever it is that this company specializes in. Maybe it's trailers. New Flyer specializes in buses.
Mm-hmm.
For example, if you're on the production floor at New Flyer, depending on what you're doing the same thing day in, day out. You're not doing overhead stick one day and then doing.
Well, you're not doing stick at all. If you're in manufacturing, you're not touching welding. Like, you're running solid wire or metal core, and that's that. And if it's a fancy day, you're on flux core, but that's rare.
And that's what I mean, right? Like,
and I'm not dissing that to all the people in manufacturing. I worked in a manufacturing plant for years, and manufacturing plants actually gave me the training to become a foreman.
I won't knock manufacturing at all. I think it's an awesome sector. And, as much as I might sound like I'm giving all these negative towards manufacturing, there's a lot of positives. I found the number one thing is it's a solid job. You don't see guys getting laid off left, right, and center like you do in other sectors. I mean, you'll go, the economy goes through things, right?
Yeah, but if you're good, you're not going to go anywhere. Yeah,
exactly, right. Well, it depends. In unions, you get to be a number, and then things happen there. But the pay's good. It's these big manufacturing jobs always work to make sure that you've got a good working space. You're not working in dark, dingy, greasy holes. For the most part, depends on how big the company is. Like, New Flyer is awesome for that, man. They've got such a clean manufacturing facility. They really take care of their employees. I know there's a bunch of other companies in Winnipeg that do the exact same thing, that they treat all their employees the same way. Great manufacturing facilities. You work for the Ironworkers Union, you're working outside in minus freaking 40 BS, windy.
Yeah, I only worked for the Ironworkers in the summer. I did one shutdown over the winter. I was like, no thanks.
Exactly.
I'm a big baby. Yeah. All right, well, let's just kind of, I want to get past this part, because you're out there, you're welding, you're working for New Flyer, you're with R&D them for a while now, but that really hasn't been the passion in your life, and that's not really how I got to know you.
Right.
I mean, you reached out to me a couple years ago, and I don't even remember what the thing is. It might have been through Metallurgy video that I put out there.
Yeah, that's what it was.
and all of a sudden you just like hit me up in my DMs being like, hey, I want to talk to you about some, welding stuff. And we started having this conversation because your passion is a blacksmith and forging. So you're on Instagram as Abstract Blacksmith, and this is something that you're very much into. And for me as a metallurgy nerd and a person that's been in the steel trades my whole life, blacksmithing and forging has been basically like the history lesson of welding, like where it all started back in the beginning when there was just hammers and fire. That, where in the welding portion, as you're going to school and you're getting this job, when did forging plop in front of you and you're like, hey, what is this thing?
Not soon enough, man. Not soon enough. I don't know if I was sleeping or what, but I went to school for welding, and oh geez, what was it? 10 years later, I finally discovered blacksmithing. It was at least 10 years later. And while I was in school, I gravitated towards welding art stuff, like the scrap metal art stuff. I saw the people making the horse sculptures and stuff, and I was like, that's very, very cool. I want to do this kind of stuff. And I started playing with that kind of stuff. And I kind of, I don't know, got a few negative comments about it, being told like, oh, you'll never make it. Arts, starving artist is the way that goes, and blah, 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 blah. So I kind of didn't push it too hard. I kind of, lost my passion for it a little bit. And then one day, a friend of mine is staying at my place, and he shows me this Alex Steele video. Alex Steele was 13-year-old guy at that point from Great Britain, and he was making hammers by hand out of a forge with a buddy. It's called a striker. You get a friend that comes and swigs a sledgehammer for you, and that gentleman's called a striker. So now you've got way more force going into your steel than what you could put into it personally. And after seeing this video, it's just like, what in the how? That's how that's done. Are you freaking kidding me? I used to look at all these different metal sculptures and think to myself, there is no way somebody sits there with an angle grinder and a die grinder shaping all this stuff. Like, how is it done? And I started seeing this stuff. I was like, oh my God, you are such an idiot. How did you not figure this out before? Okay. My buddy says, like, you want to go build a forge? Yes, I do. So we head out to the shop, and, I've got, welder and saws and plasma cutter and drill and all this stuff already for, I'm kind of on the side of starting a welding business on my own. And then he got me into this, and it's like, well, dude, now this is what I'm talking about. This takes my art in the direction I've always wanted to go. And I started playing with the blacksmithing at that point. I'm just like, I don't know, man. How the heck my brain didn't pick that up earlier is beyond me.
So what are these first steps? Like, I mean, like, you're a part of a guild now. You're into your knees now. Like you're a part of conferences. You're a part of mentoring panels. But in the beginning, like, for the average person that might have a couple welding tools in the garage, and they've been going online and they see some people making some knives out of some old car springs or something, and what's the stuff they need to get started? Like, how did you just go to the buy a forge, or you do like how?
Well, you actually can now,
because they're really expensive though.
They're not cheap. Yeah. I mean, prior to this whole forged and fire craze and everything being the way it is now, you couldn't go to Princess Auto and buy a forge for, I think they've got them on sale for $6.99 or something like that when they're on sale. A Mighty Forge built in Canada. But if you don't want to go that route, and like I said, like I didn't have that option when I got into it. It was a matter of go on YouTube, watch videos on how guys build this stuff, and then you got to try to figure out where you're sourcing your materials from. The first one we built, we got the fire bricks from Canadian Tire. Learned the hard way that those bricks don't hold up to forge welding temperatures all so well. They work great in fireplaces. You bring them up to forge welding temperature and they melt like glass, and that's not the greatest thing. So you got to source the right bricks. We ended up going to a pottery store and found kiln bricks. They work awesome. That's what the majority of guys are using for their forges is soft fire brick from either a kiln place, or you you can order them from specialty fire store places. You can order them on Amazon nowadays too if you want to. I wouldn't recommend that because those soft bricks are so delicate, it's insane. And then the burner thing to actually induce the heat into your forge, dude, the technology for that on the small scale, like where we're at nowadays, has changed so much. When I started, it was like, oh, go with a Venturi burner. It naturally sucks in the air to create a harder flame, and then you can adjust it to get, you know, a neutralizing flame. Meaning that you've got enough propane pumping in with the oxygen mix that you're not oxidizing your material like crazy, right?
Or
like,
leaving carbon behind.
Yeah,
Carburizing,
right.
Yeah.
Well, carburizing isn't such a bad idea in the blacksmithing world. It's not going to hurt you to carburize stuff, unless that's the side to that that's going to harm you is the amount of propane that you're pumping in is going to pump up the CO2 in your shop and you're going to die. So you don't want that. It's not harmful to the steel necessarily. It's just harmful to you, right? So you don't want that. You got to have good exhaust systems for these things, man, because they do produce CO2, and you know, you got to watch out for the different types of. Do not throw galvanizing in there. Me and you both know how welding galvanized is. Yeah, you think that's bad? You should see what a forge does to a galvanized piece. Holy frick, buddy. So basic welding skills is all you need. You can literally be a first-time welder and can build a forge. And everything's available on YouTube.
I don't think that that's a natural connection people make. I don't know a lot of forge people that know how to weld or have any interest in welding or have ever welded. Like, I mean, you brought up Forged and Fire. You could tell these guys on Forged and Fire don't know how to weld. It's like, dude,
a lot of them,
dude, turn up your wire speed, turn up your wire speed, dude, turn up your wire speed. But, you know, but then on the other side, there's all these welders that, you know, they really don't, I don't know if they're in the same field, even though it seems like it would be such a natural thing to say it's the same thing. You know, I don't know if many people actually make that connection. I
can almost guarantee you that first year apprentice or under guy, like anybody that's falling under that level of schooling has almost no clue. Like everyone I talk to about forging that's in the welding community, unless they've stepped up into level 2 or higher, where you start diving into a little bit more metallurgy and stuff, they're clueless to it. It's like, what? Something exists beyond mild steel? What are you talking? Or there's different types of stainless? What? You know, unless you're into TIG welding stainless, then you'll understand that, oh, you know, you need to understand the different grades of stainless. If you're just a MIG welder on a production line putting stuff together, chances are you have no clue about the metallurgy side of things because it doesn't matter to you, number one, right? So that's where you start to really get into picking this knowledge up, is when it actually matters to you. Do you need to know it? As a blacksmith, if you don't know how to weld, you're doing yourself a major disservice as far as I'm concerned. And as a welder, dude, they need to pump up that knowledge that's going into level 1. Because
and I know that we've brought in, like when I was teaching at the college, we would bring in the local blacksmith guild every year to do a presentation and show the students, you know, we talk about, you know, producing steel. It's part of the tests. And well, you know, now, you know, we talk about coke and you know, and what's the difference between coal and charcoal, and, you know, like these simple basics that there's things around. Like we go to the store and we buy charcoal for our barbecue, and it's like, oh, that's coal. That ain't coal. That's different. Why is it different? You know, where does it come from? You know, did it come from a tree or did it come from an animal? Like, you know, there's different types of energy stored in these things, and how that energy comes out. So, you know, all these little things that people don't think about, but it would be beneficial to them to know, right?
Yeah, dude. I keep on duding like crazy here. Okay, so
everyone's gonna be like, these Winnipeg people, man.
Yeah, this hose head. Jeez Louise, eh? Okay, so the science behind metal is insane. There's so much science behind it that most of these guys, like our blue collar community, if you want to call it, don't give a flying F about science. They went through chemistry class and were like, what is this BS. I don't want to learn this. Just let me make things, right? The crossover of science into metal is just, holy man, dude. I've just been mind blown by the metallurgy science that you start to pick up when you're dealing with knife making is the real big one. These knife makers are insane, dude. I'm not a knife maker per se, kind of played with it a little bit, but my big thing is I don't know enough yet. And so many guys are like, you need to just kind of do it and start making mistakes. And it's like, no, I get that. I know how to shape things and make mistakes.
I know how to make
I can do that. Yeah, but I want to understand things better. Well,
yeah, like I got an ex-wife. I know how to make mistakes. Yeah.
But the amount of different steels that are out there and how they react at different heats. There's certain steels you can't forge at low heats. You have to have that steel extremely hot, and it can't be too hot either, because then it starts to crack on you. Then you start walking into heat treating it and understanding that, well, this metal heat treats in water, this one heat treats in oil, this one heat treats in a different type of oil, because there's different viscosities of oil. So that changes. It's all the speed at what the heat is pulling out. There's even air hardening tools.
Mm-hmm.
And then you start walking into stainless steels, and they're like, oh yeah, you gotta plate quench it. So you get thick aluminum plates, and you clamp it between two aluminum plates to quench it that way, because the aluminum sucks all the heat out, and then the aluminum actually helps it not warp. Yeah. And it doesn't warp that way either. It clamps it so it doesn't warp, because that's the other thing. You get steel cooling at different rates. We see this in welding. Depending where you put the heat in is depending where it's going to pull, right? The same thing is in heat treating. As that knife is cooling, if it's cooling off at a different rate on one side versus the other, it's going to pull to that side versus the other side. So you start getting warping in your steel as you're heat treating. And this is something that I would have had no clue about if I wouldn't have taken the time to learn this stuff. And I'm so glad that I've learned this stuff first, so that I don't go wasting hundreds of dollars on material and frustrations of building this thing. I was just listening to Noah Vachon. He's a very well-respected knife maker in the Canadian scene, talking about how he went through 9 different knives trying to get one that worked, because every single one, he had failures in some sort of way. And it's just like, for me to think about the fact that this guy's been building knives for as long as he's been doing it for, and the knowledge he has under his belt, and he's still struggling. I mean, yeah, I better just kind of get to it already. But at the same time, like, man, I think the guys that just jump straight into it without any knowledge whatsoever,
they're going to lose a lot of money.
It's going to bite them in the ass. They're going to have a lot of frustrations. And it's just, no, you know what? I don't want to put stuff out into this world that isn't right. That's the other thing. I want to make sure that when I put out my welds, when I do my welds, I want to make sure that, I did that weld full, and there was a tiny little porosity at the end. Doesn't pass my quality control.
All right. Well, this is a great time to take a break, and when we get back on the break, I want to get into a little bit more of 2 angles. One, I want to talk a little bit more about this metallurgy and blacksmithing angle and how they fit. But I also want to talk a little bit about, how people can get involved, and, what are some of the easy steps, and maybe what are some of the simple questions that might come up when people, approach a blacksmith, and even the things they see on TV that sometimes aren't explained. So we'll be right back here with Lynndon Novak from Abstract Blacksmith on Instagram right after these commercials from our sponsors. And we are back here on the CWB Association podcast. My name is Max Ceron, and we have Lynndon Novak coming to us from Winnipeg. He is a blacksmith, welder, fitter, works for New Flyer, and hosts his own podcast, does his own shows, does his own stuff. He's on Instagram, helps work with the big conferences that they do, which I've been invited to attend and had a lot of fun at, and made some new friends there too. So, it was always lots of fun. But right before the break, we were talking about, well, we're kind of going all over the place with blacksmithing, but let's pull this back. And, you made a comment about, in welding, people don't know enough about science to really help them with their career. And one of the things I learned recently, and through you, is working with blacksmiths and talking to blacksmiths, is that blacksmiths also don't know generally more than they have to. And that might just be a thing that is just the truth of any trade or any people. You kind of know what you need to know to make the thing you want to make. And you don't need to go further than that. So like if I said to you, hey, Mr. Knife Maker, you know, I want to get into these knives, you can just YouTube it and be like, okay, I need this, this, and this. And it's basically a shopping list. You can go do it and you replicate it, try a few times, make it, it's out the door. Everyone's happy. But you didn't really understand why, right? You didn't really understand the chemistry or the, you know, the integral parts of that process, because you don't have to. You can still make that knife. And like you said, some people can just trial and error it for 100 years and just make and they could figure it out.
Yeah.
But how many, like, and this is a completely arbitrary question because I don't know if there's an answer, but, you know, is there metallurgy super nerds in the blacksmithing worlds that are like, before they even touch the metal, they're like, no. The microstructure of this needs to be 800 degrees and this one's going to mix with this. Don't even bother trying. It's going to be a failure. Do this. Is there those people, those crazy people that just lay it out like that? Because that's super interesting.
I'm showing you a book right now.
Okay.
This book is called Knife Engineering, Steel Heat Treating and Geometry. This book was written by a gentleman, Dr. Lynndon Thomas. Dr. Lynndon Thomas is a metallurgist physician. He's not a blacksmith.
Mm-hmm.
He loves knives and he loves steel. He actually, at one point, had a group, if I'm not mistaken, it's still an active group called Steel Nerds on whatever thing.
Facebook or whatever.
It wasn't on Facebook. It was before Facebook. Yeah, right.
ICQ.
Yeah, right. That book will blow your mind when it comes to the metallurgy knowledge that's in there. Absolutely blow your mind. And I know I've actually got a gentleman that I'm lining up for my podcast. And if you want to know about blacksmithing, once a week I sit down with a blacksmithing person, knife maker, welder, whatever it is, for the podcast Forge Side Chat. And we put that out there for the world to enjoy and educate themselves on, essentially is what the basis of that is. Got a gentleman lined up in a couple of weeks from the United States. I normally don't interview people from the United States, but this gentleman is so damn interesting. I was like, I gotta interview him. He's playing with different copper alloys. He's got, you know, a science under his belt with all of this stuff where he's like, I've added some stuff to copper that has turned copper into a usable tool steel. And I'm just like, oh my God, I want to eat your brain. Mm-hmm. So,
well, that might almost be like lost arts, because, you know, thousands and thousands of years ago, before the Iron Revolution, you know, copper was made into a bazillion different things that was usable and held an edge and was not soft and bendable. And, you know, so like, I mean, probably stuff has been lost in history, even with these things, you know.
You got to wonder about that, right? You really.
Well, they find these Viking swords that have been buried underground for 6,000 years, and there's no rust on them. And apparently they wouldn't have known how to do that, but I guess they did, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. That's a friend of mine recently dropped a bunch of knowledge on me, a sword making book from Germany or something like that. And these guys were making stuff that we almost don't understand nowadays. And it's been broken down by museums and stuff like that. They've analyzed these swords with x-rays and everything like that, and they understand where the pearlite in that blade ends, and just like how I don't get it. I really don't. Like, there's so much more for me to learn.
Without microscopes, how did they do that? Just by feel, by sound, by spark, by color, you know?
Quenching under the full moon and the right temperatures. I don't know.
Well, altitude probably makes a difference.
It does.
Atmospheric pressure probably makes a difference. Like, if you want it to get really, 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 real specific, everything matters. The humidity in the air. Like, I mean.
Well, there's a reason why Damascus is called Damascus, and that's because the originality of that, or the origins of that story, are from an area of the Middle East called Damascus, where it was very heavily traded. That wasn't even the area where they figure it was mostly manufactured, was in Damascus. It was where it was heavily traded. And if you go down the trade route from where Damascus is, you start getting into regions that have iron that are very rich in carbides, I believe is the right thing, or the steel that they produce is very rich in carbides. Again, sorry, some of this knowledge is beyond me. I'm not a metallurgist physician here, right? But that's why it's known as Damascus, is this steel held materials that created natural patterns when forge welded into these blades. And they had there's guys that are still trying to figure out the science behind that nowadays with, it's called woots is what they're calling it nowadays, because Damascus has picked up this term of just essentially being pattern welded steel. You take one steel with a very high carbon level, and then you take another steel with a high nickel level, you forge weld them together, and you can actually see the differences in the steel when etched. That's your Damascus, or your pattern welded steel, right?
See, and that's very interesting, because I was so confused when I first started hearing about Damascus, because as a metallurgy nerd, we went over the Damascus steel from the location, and that Damascus steel was not a thing but a place. And that's because there was a natural vein of iron ore in Damascus that had like the perfect qualities of everything they needed. It just came out of the ground that way. And there's steel veins and iron veins and ore veins around the world, and they're all different. But what came out of the ground in Damascus, and also what probably came out of the ground in Northern Europe for the Vikings, was just the right mix. And then I started watching these shows, and they're like, "Hey, we're gonna make Damascus steel," and I was like, "What are you flying there? Are you what? What do you mean make?" And then I realized that it was more about the pattern and the style of the forging, and that it's kind of two different things now. And so, what was the term you said? What's the OG Damascus steel called?
Okay, so if you want to see this like real good, there's a gentleman in Alaska, actually, is the guy that I'd like to point out, is Spencer Sanderson. Guy's making what's called woots, and he's doing the science of it. He's adding a little bit of this and documenting the differences, and heat treating at different levels and documenting the differences. He's doing the real R&D on this stuff. This is the stuff I'm like, yes, somebody's doing this. This is awesome. I'm glad it's not me, but somebody's doing this. Yes. There are a few other guys, actually. I think, if I'm not mistaken, a good friend of the guy that I was talking about there with the copper. I want to say his name is Dr. Woots on Instagram. He's in the same Toronto vicinity as the guy I was talking about, Michigan or something around there. And same thing. They'll build this furnace with clay, and they add in coal and charcoal and sand and iron oxide, and like they'll literally take a freaking pound or big bag of iron oxide and add that to their mix to make their steel. And it's just like, ooh.
What the heck?
If you go on YouTube, there is a video of some gentlemen that were doing it, that had like their computers hooked up, that were watching thermocouples on all the different temperatures going in. I don't know if they were reading the gases for, getting their chemical composition and stuff, but it was science, man. It's just like, yeah. So I wish my job was more about doing that instead of like, I've got a
maybe someday, man. Maybe someday.
Yeah, fingers crossed, right? I'm on the right track supposedly here, so we'll see where it goes. Yeah, man. It's the woots. It's a cool thing, dude, and Spencer's got it down, so check him out.
All right, so now backing away from the the super science of like people that are able to break these things down to the molecular level, which I think is cool, and it's going to be exactly the same science that occurs in welding. Like, people don't realize, like, it's not like a different thing. It's exactly the same thing. The same things that they work it with, and the same issues they have with oxidization, carbon migrations of steels, and hydrogen pockets. All these things are the same things that welders have to try to avoid and have issues with and worry about with the products they're making. But now on the other side, we can go back. I want to go back to the simple side. So if I'm a person at home and I want to start welding, I can go to Canadian Tire, pick up a $300 welder, pick up some steel for $20, and I can make a mess in my garage and start figuring it out. Now, if you are wanting to get into forging, what are the steps you got to take to, we talked about getting the fire brick and getting the right stuff. No, not the Canadian Tire stuff. And that's different. You want the stuff that's a higher temperature stuff, like for kilning, because kilning gets into the 4 to 5 to 6,000 degree ranges. Okay, now we're talking hot enough because you're not going to need to go that hot. I think forge
3,000.
ranges. Yeah, so you're going to be at somewhere around the 25 to 3,000 range. That's plenty. Now, what else do you need? What are the so you're using propane? Is natural gas fine, or is propane better? You know, or what about electricity? You know, like
it's all up to the user, my man. I mean, it depends which game you want to play. I personally went propane because if I went with coal or charcoal, any sort of fire producing, well, I guess propane's fire producing as well, but any solid burning material is going to produce smoke, right? I'm in I was in a small shop. My shop at the time was 20 by 20 with 8-foot ceiling. I didn't have the ability to be exhausting that and stuff without major renovations. So it wasn't something. So I went to propane. I still needed the exhaust for propane, so I set up an old furnace fan out my window to exhaust the fumes. Natural gas, almost identical to propane when it comes to the uses of a forge. It's a little bit different of a burn. Natural gas doesn't burn as hot as propane, so there's a little bit of differences there. Too. Yeah, there's a little bit difference there, but in Canada, most houses have natural gas plumbed directly to your house. So it's kind of an added bonus if you went the natural gas route of just being able to plug and play, right? And I know a lot of businesses go that route because in order to be certified, you have to have everything plumbed properly and then have all that certified as well. And it just seems to be that everyone gravitates towards natural gas because it's there already. You don't have to worry about getting new plumbing put in and all that jazz for running your forge. The new thing that everybody's starting to go towards, like you were saying, electric. You can get induction forges, and man, so cool. They're cheap to run. They're not that expensive to buy. Like if you go to Princess Auto,
super fast. Yeah,
you go to Princess Auto, you can pick up a propane forge, like I was saying, for like $700, I think, on sale. Maybe a little bit cheaper. I can't remember exactly. An induction forge, I was looking into it. I think it's $1,500 online on Amazon. You want to go a coal forge? I mean, you could do a coal forge and like dirt cheap. I think.
Well, I've watched people do it with like 5-gallon pails and sand and a hair dryer.
Well, like you could dig a hole in the ground. Oh, here I did forging on the weekend. I had a friend over. We had a massive bonfire, and I said, let's see if we can throw a big piece of steel in the fire and forge with that. And we did. Got it up to not like melting temperatures, but it was red hot just in the bonfire. Pulled it out and started bending it and made a big ribbon out of 5/8 by 2-inch wide flat bar just with fire heat. Right?
Totally not feasible because you'll burn 60,000 pounds of wood to make one thing. But
precisely.
At the end of the day, you want to be efficient.
Yes.
Right? Because that's what you're looking for from heat is efficient heat. Because anything like, I mean, I can burn tires long enough to get steel red hot, but that's not good. You know what I mean? Like you want to have the cost versus how well it burns versus the byproduct of smoke and CO2. A lot of things to factor in there, right?
Yeah. There's guys that have used corn. You can use dung if you want to, of all things. It would blow you away what you can burn to produce heat. But like you said, efficiency, and that really comes into play when you start running a business. You start running a business and you're looking at like, number one, I don't want to be adding fuel to the fire constantly. I just want it to go. An induction forge is amazing because now you don't have to worry about all the added heat, the dangers of having a fire in your shop and possibly burning your shop down on you. You just, and like you were saying, fast. You walk up to it, you put your steel into it for like 30 seconds, you pull it out and it's red hot, and away you go to work. Your steel cools off, shut it off, and you're done for the day. You don't have to worry about your hot work time, right? Like you would in a weld shop. You're doing any hot work, you can't just walk away from that when you're done working. You got to give.
You're on it now. Yeah,
it depends on your insurance, right? I've had anywhere from half an hour to 4 hours be given to me as a time frame of time to spend watching after hot work, which 4 hours is insane to me. But at the same time, I can get it, man. I mean, and the blacksmithing side, there's so much more to that than just the forge, right? You're doing all this hard work. You're split. You hit something that's full of slag, and your slag goes flying everywhere, lands on a little piece of plastic under the bench or whatever, and starts slowly burning that. And half an hour maybe wasn't quite enough time for it to actually catch on fire, right? I hope my insurance company's not listening to me, because right now they told me half an hour.
All right, so that's okay. That's step one. We got the heat. We got the heat machine. We got the thing that's going to make the thing hot. Now, what about the thing that we're going to put in there? Are we going to start practicing on like some hot roll square bar?
Some rebar, buddy.
Okay, but rebar is way different than like the steel you buy at Canadian Tire. So why would I start with rebar instead of, say, a 5/8 square bar? I mean, what would be the benefits to it, and like plus minus?
It's free.
Yeah,
you can find rebar
cheap. Yeah,
anywhere. You'll find a chunk of rebar sitting on the side of the road. Grab it, try to do something with it, just to get the feel of it, to see if you like it. Now, I'm not saying that's where you should start. That is where most people start. Where you should start, I think you should go and get yourself a piece of mild steel, wherever you get it from. I think 1/2-inch square bar is a beautiful material to start on. It's not so heavy that you're going to get churned off by working on it, but it's not so light that you're going to think that, oh, well, this is easy, my kid can do it, right? It'll give you a little bit of an idea of what it takes to swing a hammer and shape something. And starting off with something as simple as taking the end of either 1/2-inch square bar or 1/2-inch round bar and hitting the end of it until you start to create a point. It's an awesome way to start getting the idea of how steel works. A lot of people think, oh, it's just easy. I just bang it and it'll shrink. And take a piece of Play-Doh that's 1/2-inch round and start squishing it and see how it reacts to you squishing it. Hot steel works almost identical as Play-Doh does in your hand. And that's actually one of the things a lot of these Damascus guys will take different colors of Play-Doh, stack it, and start to, twist it and do different things with it to understand this is how Damascus works. You can essentially do that with any sort of blacksmithing. You got something that you want to make like a flower, take your piece of Play-Doh in the same dimensions that you would have your steel and start playing with that and figure out this is where I've got to squish it. This is where I've got to indent it. I got to stretch this out here and whatnot, right?
Now, in terms of like what the finished product is, I would say most people are going to go into this and be like, I want to make a knife. Like it's the first thing I tried before.
That's what everybody wants to do.
Right. So like, it's like, and actually my first attempt didn't look too bad. It was a lot of grinding. I know now, next time, bang it thinner. But I mean, but
it looked good. I thought it was good.
Yeah, no, it was sharp as too. Like, I mean, I got a good edge on it. My here, see if I get the term right. My file would skate well across.
There you go. Yeah, yeah. That determines your hardness.
Yeah. But I used a spring steel because I had enough carbon there that I could harden it. Mild steel does not have enough carbon. So for the person that gets a piece of mild steel, and this is a very common thing for people doing CWB tests, and for people that want to do stuff with mild steel, they're worried about them quenching it or making it and over hardening it, creating martensite, which is what in the microstructure. That's actually not possible with mild steel. There's not enough carbon to create martensite, and there's not enough carbon for it to harden like that. All you're doing is just cooling it quickly. I mean, there's other issues in terms of hydrogen and oxygen, but not carbon. So if you're going to make a knife, you're not making it out of that square bar unless it's just ornamental, right?
That's right. Well, I mean, for the most part, you're not making anything that's got a significant amount of strength to it out of mild steel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But what about the rebar? Rebar can have lots of carbon in it.
Rebar is so unreliable as to what it is. You have no idea. But you know what? That being said, guys have made knives using rebar, and they've made decent knives using rebar. So can you? Sure. And it's like you said, it's the carbon levels in there. There's other things that kind of go into place: molybdenum, chromium, vanadium. You start playing with those different elements in the steel, and it makes a big difference as well. But like you said, carbon is the main thing, man. You get a high level of carbon, and that's where you start getting into blade steels.
So then, if you are the look, just to stay with the steel now, if you wanted to make a knife, for your first attempt, what piece of steel would I go to my local Russell or Var Steel or, wherever your local steel suppliers?
No.
What are you doing? What do you, like, where are you getting steel from? What should I use if I want to make my first knife?
You're going to avoid all of those places and you're going to go to my man Lawrence at maritimenifesupply.ca and you're going to order yourself some steel from his website. He's got everything. I mean, everything you could possibly need for knife making supplies. He sells forges, anvils, hammers, tongs. He sells sandpaper. He sells belt grinders, the machine itself and all the belts that go on there, polishing compounds, pins for your handle materials, a slew of different metal that you can use for making knives. And for your basic first person knife, you're probably going to want to pick a mono steel, a basic carbon steel, sorry.
Mm-hmm.
I say mono steel because then that's the next level of getting into multiple layers of steel, that Damascus, right? And that's the common term that, I just go mono steel because it's easier. So mono steel is a lot easier than getting into Damascus. You start playing with Damascus and it's a whole nother game. But your basic mono steel, something like a 1084, a 1090, 1095, something up in that range. Make sure when you buy this steel to read over the data sheet that comes with it. The data sheet will explain to you everything you need to know on your side as to what you need to do to handle this steel properly and how to handle it afterwards as well. It'll tell you the heats, the soak times, what to quench in, and what to temper at as well. Tempering is a huge thing that, if you don't understand it, you'll overlook that. You'll watch the shows and you'll just be like, I just got to quench it in oil and then I shape it afterwards, right? No. You've got to make sure you temper that blade because you've got so much stress built up in that steel now from it heat treating. You go to try to do something with that thing, it'll just snap on you like no problem, like a dry twig, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you got to make sure you temper it.
Depending on what temperature you temper at, you'll get different hardness results from that. And you can look into that. Google has a simple chart for that. If you just look it up on Google, heat treating temperatures and hardness outputs, you'll get a chart that'll show you your different ranges of temperatures and the color that corresponds with tempering at that color. I'm sure most of us as welders have seen this before, that different heats with a torch, as you're heating up a piece of polished steel, you'll start to see colors induce into that heel, starting at yellow, going up to a purple, and then kind of disappearing into a gray burnt look, right? You want, for most knives, to be at that yellow color, about 400 degrees, and you want to do that for 2 hours. And you want to do it for 2 cycles to ensure that you're removing all that stress from that steel. And of course, different steels are different about that.
They're all going to react different. Yeah, they're all going to change color at different times and even have a different type of color.
Yeah, for stainless steel, you can cryogenically heat treat it after you're done heat treating it, after you're done your tempering, after you're done your heat treat, because it actually really sets in that martensite versus just the simple heat treat. So there's one more step you can go there with certain stainlesses. That's totally beyond me. But yeah, the simple side of making these knives is you got to understand those basics of it if you're going to do this. Don't just jump into it and be like, I'm just going to throw a piece of leaf spring into water and that's good, right? No. I'll tell you, number one, right? You don't want to put it in water. It's it'll crack on you. Leaf spring steel isn't meant to quench in water. It's meant to quench in oil. The other thing is you want that oil warm. Cold oil won't do the trick. It needs to be up to, I think it's 70 degrees is about where you want it to be. Too hot's no good either. It's the viscosity level that you're really running for there too, right? If it's too thick, then it starts to create it creates a pocket, a thermal pocket around the steel. And that's the other thing.
It actually won't touch it. Yeah.
Yeah. You can't just put your steel in there and hold it. You've got to put it in there and swish it around in the water so that you remove that vapor jacket and actually make sure that water or that oil is actually touching your steel and quenching it.
All right. So we went over the heat machine. Then we went over the type of steel. So, you can get these options for the machines. These are the types of options for steel, rebar to just practice on, some square bar to make something pretty, or then some better steels if you want to make a knife. The last element that people always ask about, you were just talking about, is the oil and the quenching, and does it matter? There's all these sayings, and I've even been told by different blacksmiths different things. So I don't know if there's an industry standard of what type of oil is best or when. I've been told dirty old oil because it's got lots of black carbon in it, and I've been told clean oil is going to be perfect, and I've been told to get proper quenching oil. Then I've been told don't use commercial oils because there's too many additives in there and those are poison. And I've been told olive oil. I've been told linseed oil. I've been told water, salt water, brine. Like for the average person that's just getting started, where are the simple starting points where you just like kind of idiot proof?
The most simple and basic starting route that almost everyone goes is canola oil. It's best if it's warmed up a little bit, not a lot, but you can simply warm it up, put your oil container in front of a heater or something like that. Be safe about it. Oil is combustible. And here's another thing that you should really watch out for. Don't fill that container to the rim. Oil, as it heats, expands. There's a gentleman in Albany, New York, that learned this the hard way and burnt down his entire neighborhood while quenching a knife, or I think it was a sword, perhaps, actually, when he put it into the quench tank and the quenchant went over the lid, spilt everywhere, caught on fire, caught everything else on fire, and burned his entire neighborhood down. So don't be that guy. It's yeah.
So just canola oil. Does it matter if it's a petrocarbon versus a hydrocarbon? I don't know if that gets that specific.
You don't want to get into using engine oils. There's a lot of toxins in engine oil. That, number one, the smoke from it is extremely bad for you. You don't want to be breathing that in. And number two, this stuff is getting into your steel, into the pores of your steel.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I don't want to stand here and say that, oh yeah, you don't want to do that because it's not healthy, and now it's engine oil on your kitchen knife, right? Because as far as I'm concerned, that stuff burns out through your tempering cycles and stuff like that. But then again, I'm no scientist, so I'm not going to say whether or not that's near say to do that. Why use toxic oil in your shop where you're breathing that stuff in, even outside? Like, frick, man, no, I don't.
Yeah.
Yeah. So canola oil works. Canola oil seems to be the one that a lot of people go to because it'll last through a lot of heat cycles. Like you can quench a lot of blades in it before it'll start to go bad.
Mm-hmm.
And it's
cheap.
Food safe, and it's cheap. Yeah, it's doubled in price in the last few years, but it's still cheap.
Yeah, well, in Saskatchewan, it's pretty cheap. Like, we make it all. Like, I mean, it's literally all canola fields around here. But
yeah,
all right, so that's like the easy go-to. What's the premier quenching oil then? Like, what's the one you buy online, or you have to go somewhere special? The pros that are like this is the royal purple of oils. Like.
Well, there's a couple different routes you can go. I know there's a company out west that I was buying it from, but I've started dealing with Lawrence again at Maritime Knife Supply. He supplies quenchant to United States and Canada. It's $50 to have a 5-gallon pail shipped anywhere. It's just freight charge. And then a pail of that stuff. When you're looking at the premium quality oil, you're looking at something like Parks 50, or Hooten K is another company that makes. Hooten's a company that makes it. Parks is a company. There's Parks AAA as well. These are your premium quality. Hooten makes equivalents of Parks 50 and AAA as well. But I can't recall if it's Hooten or if it's Parks that Lawrence carries, but he carries both levels of it. And man, he ships it so bloody fast. It's insane. You order it today and it'll be here tomorrow. No, it's not that fast, but it's fast.
But is it like hundreds of dollars for?
Yeah, you're looking at about, yeah. Yeah, you're looking at a couple $100 for a 5-gallon pail.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
but
would
you can
the
split that with your
average
buddy.
person be able to tell the difference?
No,
Yeah.
definitely
So
not.
like, I mean, like I would put myself at a very low level. You know, I used olive oil for my first one just because I had a tub of it sitting around and I didn't have canola
Yeah.
oil, but they were like basically any oil would work that's clean. And I was like, so I did that. And my knife turned out good and got hard. And I think I did all right. But, you know, if I was to go buy the $400 or $300 thing of oil, you know, I don't know if it would be worth it for me to invest like that yet. You know what I mean?
Oh, it was barely worth it for me to invest it. I decided to buy some because I make hammers and axes a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think.
And when you're a tradesperson in it, you wanted to know what it did, right?
Yeah, well, I'm big into the research and development thing, right? So that
Mm-hmm.
was where that comes from. Is like, well, let's see what the difference is, right? And
Mm-hmm.
for somebody, the user end, you'll never know. As a maker, hell yeah, you'll freaking know, because there's going to be, like you were saying, the file that skates across the blade. Most knife makers will get into buying either a hardness chisel set or a hardness file set, and each file is set to a different level of Rockwell. And if it skates, then you're at that Rockwell level. If it doesn't, then you're not yet, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when you start playing with these different quenching oils, you'll get a couple more points on your hardness, a couple more RC points. Instead of getting 59, now you're getting 61. And it's like, oh, that was so worth it. For me, making, like I said, hammers and axes, was it worth it? Not the $200 worth when I,
No.
you know, this is the other thing is majority of the steel I use, 1045, it's a medium carbon steel. It's
Yeah.
water quench. I don't even need to buy oil. So
Yeah.
there's that. That's good as well.
Yeah, and then 1045, you're saying at about a 0.4 to 0.5 carbon. You know, at 10, you said 1084, you're sitting at 0.8 to 0.991, somewhere 93, somewhere in there. So, you know, like that's a big difference, right?
Yeah.
In
Let's
terms,
get guys with D2. What's D2? What's that? 1.2?
yeah, well, now you're getting close to like getting into the cast world where it's got,
Yeah.
well, you actually start to get past like actual carbides, you know, graphite chunks in there that are gonna, like, you'll even see it on the spark when you hit it. It's gonna shoot out, right? Like,
That's one of the, okay, so that's one of the things you can do to determine if you've got a steel that is usable, that was just scrap steel, something like
Mhm.
an axe shaft or a leaf spring. Is it actually a leaf spring? I don't know. You know, maybe it wasn't a leaf spring. I just got it out of the scrap pile. Take your angle grinder to it and compare your spark pattern, right?
Yeah,
Carbon
exactly.
spark patterns at different levels.
That's right.
That blew me away when I found that out. I was out of the straight out of the one of the first thing I learned in the blacksmithing world out of welding. I was just like, what? How did I not know this before?
Yeah, and for the people that are listening, if it's got almost no carbon, you'll just get a long single spark, and as the carbon content goes up, it starts to shoot out. And if you get to cast, it'll actually burst. Those bursts are actually carbides building energy and then exploding within themselves. So if you have the leader and then the bursts, the more bursts, the more carbon. Bigger bursts, more carbon pockets.
It's so cool, dude. So cool.
All right, man. Well, you know, for the people listening, if you notice there were some weird blips in this episode, you know, we had some technical issues. We started on one computer, went to a second computer, and now finished on a cell phone. And so there's going to be some editing. Hopefully, it's all smooth as a peach when you guys hear this. We've been having some adventures getting this episode done, but it's in the books. And Orlando, let's do some quick information. You said, you know, give me your favorite YouTube channel, or where can people, you know, give people some starting points here in terms of stores, maybe in terms of YouTube, and then your own podcast. You know, how do we get on that?
Oh, quick freaking shout outs here. Hey, Rainy Day Forge, my man Justin Lamoureux. He used to help host the Forge Side chat with me. We were the men that started the Manitoba Blacksmith Guild. We also did a virtual edition of Canarn with yourself there a year ago now, just over a year ago. That was a huge event. If you go to canarn.ca, the event is available to the public on there. You can use the code, I believe it's Big Anvils. You might have to play around with where the capital is on Big and Anvil there. I think it's Big B, Big A. Play around with it. You'll figure it out. A ton of information. That was was 3-day event,
Mhm.
presenters all long, demos all day long, interviews all day long. That was massive. It was so huge, so much information. One of the guys that almost everyone talks about in the blacksmithing community that's super good on learning your basic blacksmithing skills is Black Bear Forge on YouTube. Can't say his name right. Torben Aumann. Can't say his name right. He's a
But
gentleman
Black Bear
from
Forge. Okay.
No, that's not Black Bear Forge. Black Bear
Oh.
Forge is another one is Torben. Another
Okay.
awesome place to hone some blacksmithing skills. Alex Steele is where I learned, but he's gone into this whole machining world lately that's not really blacksmithing anymore. Rainy Day Forge on YouTube is, again, he's a knife maker. So if you're into knives, excellent content there. Maritime Knife Supply, like I said already, everything you need for knives. If you want to get yourself a heat treating oven, they have Paragon and Even Heat kilns. You can use the code FSC kiln and save yourself $100 on one of those heat treating ovens. We're also dealing with a company, DeTwiller Linseed Oil. They're manufactured in Saskatoon and sold Canada-wide. I believe he's even dipping down into the United States with his sales. And he makes awesome linseed oil. Like you go to the store to buy linseed oil, it is not comparable to this guy's linseed oil. It's awesome stuff. And when you start playing with your wood handle material on knives or building hammers and axes like I do, linseed oil becomes something you need to have in your shop for coating this stuff. And it also works great for coating steel too. If you're just coating bare steel with linseed oil, this is something that I just learned from Dawson recently, actually, on our podcast, Forge Side Chat. I had him on for the last episode. His father loves to coat steel in just linseed oil, bare steel linseed oil, dries it, buffs it off, and it lasts rust-free for years like that, apparently. And it's just like, what? I would have never thought about doing that. He's actually looking into making a linseed paint as his next product that he wants to make available to people.
Oh, yeah. No, we use linseed oil in the machine shop for coating like our shear presses, our shear edge knives, for the shear, for the brake press, for all the coupling equipment, because it keeps it clean, rust free, and nothing sticks to it. So things like materials don't get stuck in the presses or in the dies. Linseed oil.
Really?
Yeah, works awesome.
Why don't I know that? Crazy. Thank you.
Well, you do now.
I want to ask you something really quick.
Yeah.
When you're your CWB coupons for your MIG test and you're going to bend the coupon, we all know you don't want to water quench that coupon to cool it off after welding it, right?
Well, the science says it won't matter. And I've done this in front of students. I've thrown up a coupon into a bucket of water, red hot, and it bends just fine. At the end of the day, good steel will bend. Good steel will bend. But you don't want to take the risk, right? Because if you do have a pocket of oxygen, or if you do have a little bit of porosity, quenching it ain't going to help. It might not hurt, but it ain't going to help. So let it cool slow.
What about just straight mild steel? If I take straight mild steel and I quench it from red hot, am I inducing any stress into that steel that's going to cause any sort of cracks on me?
Science-wise, not really. Not really. I mean, aside from the hydrogen you're introducing from the water, but it creates what you said earlier, it creates a pocket from the heat, or the water doesn't actually touch it. It turns to steam and gets the out of there so fast, then it drops the temperature. There's not enough carbon in there to change the microstructure. But what you're doing is that you're shocking the steel and you're locking in some of the residual stress. So you're creating some stress issues, distortion issues, but not necessarily microstructure issues.
So we've been talking about this back and forth, a few of friends of mine, and it's like, once you've quenched mild steel, and you start bending it, are we seeing people with cracks and whatnot? And that's kind of a conversation that we were throwing around a little.
Not usually. And you could do the test, take a piece of mild steel, get it red hot, throw it in water and bend it. It should bend just fine.
Oh, interesting. Good to know.
Now, for all the people out there that are going to go do CWB tests, don't quench it. Don't pretend like Max told me to quench it. I'm not telling you to quench it. I'm just saying that on the science level, there shouldn't be enough carbon there to make any difference.
Right. No, I remember my teacher telling us that in school as well, but it just seems that, and I think this falls into the fact that what happens with your forge, depending, like we were talking about the different types of flame you can have, it will decarburize your steel. And the more you take mild steel, it's 1018. You don't have very much carbon in that. You pull the carbon out of that, what are you left with, right?
Yeah, exactly. And it's not like things just leave and it's happy. When things leave, they leave pockets behind, and those pockets get filled by other things like hydrogen, right? So, the empty vacuoles left in steel from moving things around get filled by other things, and those other things generally are not good for it.
Max, gotta say something to you, buddy. I say this on every episode of Forge Side Chat. I love you.
Thanks, buddy. Well, it's been great having you on the show. We'll try to revisit. And for the people listening, and you're interested in forging, you're interested in getting into blacksmith, check out his podcast, Abstract Blacksmith, on Instagram, Forge Side Chat. And also, they're a part of the guild. The information, you can reach out to him. He's always been very helpful to me, and always very good group of people. I love working with this new group of industry that I've been able to befriend in the last couple of years, and it's really been eye-opening. So I hope everyone listening has enjoyed the show.
We hope you enjoyed the show.